shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make.
Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet.
Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make.
Hello, everybody, or anybody that may be out there listening. I am here to talk about the Carly Gregg case. I've been following this sort of loosely. I didn't watch the trial, but I was just listening to Carly's defense attorney. She's being interviewed by Melanie Little. She's an attorney. And I feel compelled to discuss this case for a very specific reason. And that has to do with prescription antidepressants and SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. One of the first SSRIs, or the first SSRI that came out, was fluoxetine, also known as the brand name of Prozac. And when that hit the market, I was early on in my career, and it was prescribed quite a bit. It's a medication that helped lots of people overcome depression and even some anxiety. Later, Prozac was used in, they call it, I think, dysmorphic premenstrual syndrome or something like that, basically for people who have agitation and depression when they're premenstrual, which is a lot of young women. And Prozac, it took off. And then after that, after Prozac, came a bunch of other SSRIs. There's Zoloft, which is sertraline. There's citalopram, which is Celexa. And then the second generation of citalopram, escitalopram, which was Lexapro. And then they had sort of these combination antidepressants. For example, Effexor, which is an SNRI, which inhibits the reuptake of norepinephrine and serotonin. And then Wellbutrin, which is completely different, works completely differently by inhibiting the reuptake of dopamine and norepinephrine. So I'm saying all of this because, these medications sort of became mainstream, and the treatment of depression suddenly became easier for primary care physicians and internal medicine physicians to prescribe these medicines because they had very little side effects, or so we thought. So I'm bringing this up because after these medications were being just handed out like candy to both children and adults alike, a problem emerged in the young adult arena with these medications. Namely, I think it was 13 to 24-year-olds. And I know we've talked before about how, the frontal lobe of us human beings doesn't really fully develop until the age of 25. So it made sort of sense that between 13 and 24, children that were prescribed these antidepressants, namely SSRIs, there was a big problem that people were noticing. Psychiatrists and other people were noticing that there was an increase in suicide in these children. And there was an increase in agitation in these children. And there was an increase in behavioral problems in these children. And so it was a problem because, the pharmaceutical companies spent a lot of money developing these medicines. And they didn't want to hear about that there was a problem with these medications. So eventually, and thankfully, a group of doctors pushed through and said, there's a problem and there's an increased risk of suicide with these medicines. So they put a black box warning label on the SSRIs. And the black box warning label essentially says that there is an increase in suicide risk with these medications when prescribed to people between the ages of 13 and 24. They didn't add the other things such as agitation and violence, but they should have. One of the reasons why children at that age were developing agitation and increased suicide risk with these SSRIs is because they were being misdiagnosed and because they have young brains. But the misdiagnosis was at the hands of probably less so psychiatrists and more so the many family practice and internal medicine and primary care doctors that now had this medicine to treat depression, which they never had before. All we had before that was Xanax and Klonopin and, Trazodone. We also had the tricyclic antidepressants, Elavil, but these had a lot of side effects and they weren't great. So what happened was these people who were being diagnosed with depression actually had bipolar. And when they came in to seek help, they were in a depressive state, because when people are bipolar, they're generally not seeking help when they're in a manic state, because mania is a lot of fun for most people. It can cause some problems, obviously, because you end up spending too much, gambling, driving too fast, having too much sex, and being in dangerous situations when you're in a manic state. But it's kind of like using cocaine or something. When you're in a manic state, people are generally happy, but they're behaving sort of impulsively and more dangerously. So people don't usually go to the doctor when they're manic. Maybe they're drugged there by a family member, but in general, they're not going and seeking help when they're manic. They're seeking help when they're depressed. And so the people that were coming in this age group that were depressed and seeking help, the doctors weren't differentiating between whether this was depression or a bipolar swing, a bipolar depressive swing, and they were just giving them these SSRIs. And when you give someone with bipolar an SSRI without a mood stabilizer, you're going to make them manic. You may give them violent tendencies. They may end up killing themselves. And this is the problem. And it still happens to this day, as evidenced by Carly Gregg. I know there's a lot of outrage about this young girl and how she coldly killed her mother with a gun and then, texted a friend and then texted her stepfather asking when he would be home, laying in wait to kill him as well. But people, I think, may not understand the nuance here, which is she had been on an SSRI. And she had been on it for several days at this point. I think it was Zoloft. She's also 13 at this point. So she is in that age range where they have the black box warning, which if you're on any prescription medication, you should check and see if the prescription medication you're taking has a black box warning, because these should be taken seriously. The pharmaceutical company likes to say that these things are very rare and unusual, but the reality is they're not. So this young girl was on this medicine, and that's when she committed this crime in cold blood. Unfortunately for her, they weren't able to bring this type of evidence in. Her mother, who she killed, was also bipolar, and her mother's mother, meaning Carly's grandmother, wanted to testify to the fact that she herself had been put on an SSRI when she was younger and had a manic episode and was violent, but the judge wouldn't allow it. So now we know Carly has a genetic predisposition to having an adverse reaction to an SSRI like Prozac or Zoloft or Celexa or escitalopram. The other thing that's I think would be helpful for her defense if they appeal this case is to have her take a genetic blood test. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but there are blood tests now that you can take to find out if genetically you can handle an SSRI, an SNRI, a dopamine reuptake inhibitor like Wellbutrin. And they let you know which one, based on your genetics, is best for you. And you can take these tests and it will show up and say, avoid this at all costs. These tests are available and a lot of people aren't aware of it. And so if you're on any of these types of medicine, you should request your doctor to order this test, Because if you're on a medicine and you feel like it's not helping, or there are side effects from it that you don't like, and the doctor's like, it's all in your head, right? That's what doctors love to say. You're crazy, right? Remember, you're crazy. So it's all in your head, these side effects that you're supposedly having, right? This test is an objective way to check and see if it's in fact all in your head. And I'll be the first to tell you that I always believe a patient. When patients came to me with complaints or issues with things, I believed them, even if it sounded outlandish. Because you know what? Over the years, what I found out is there were too many people that were brushed off by other specialists and doctors and told that it was all in their head, when in fact they actually had a problem. And I saw this over and over again in my practice. I had a woman who was chronically fatigued. Everyone diagnosed her with, quote, chronic fatigue syndrome. And I decided, you know what? Let me screen her for narcolepsy. I did. She had symptoms of narcolepsy. We did a sleep study and she had narcolepsy. She was 30 years old when she got diagnosed with it. Okay. So another woman with endometriosis, she even had the procedure. She had the, I'm blanking on the colposcopy. Well, basically where they went inside of her uterus and looked for the lesions. And she was told she didn't have it, but she had every symptom of endometriosis, every symptom, classic. So I sent her to a different gynecologist who I really respected. And she ended up having, another test, and she was littered with these lesions inside of her uterus. So, I always believe the patient. And I think it borders on malpractice when people brush patients off saying, no, that's not possible. A lot of doctors, I think, do this when they simply don't know. And instead of saying, I don't know, because you can't possibly know everything, saying, I don't know this, I'm going to check with a colleague or read into it or find out, because that's what I did. So the bottom line, I guess I'm trying to say, is these SSRIs are overprescribed. And they can be dangerous. And I'm not saying anybody that's on them shouldn't be on them. That's not what I'm saying. I think they help quite a bit for a lot of people. But in this case with Carly, I think it's very likely that that's what caused her violent outburst. Now she's 15 years old, or 14. Was she 13, then 14, 15? I'm not sure. But either way, young, very young. And she's in a prison for the rest of her life. Or 40 years, I think. I'm not sure. Like I said, I didn't really follow the case, but it got me amped up when I heard about it, just in a nutshell, because I think this stuff is overlooked and people who haven't experienced don't understand what these medicines can do, particularly to a young mind. So it sounds like the judge really didn't allow a lot of things that could have helped her defense. And, her being tried as an adult, I also find not okay. It's no bueno. When you're 14 years old, you can't be tried as an adult. You're a child, for fuck's sake. They shouldn't be trying any 14-year-old as an adult. She was put in solitary confinement. She couldn't contact anyone. 14. So first she goes on this medicine that sets her off the wall. She does this horrible violent act against her mother and her stepfather. And then she's placed in adult prison with solitary confinement, can't talk to anyone. I'm sure she was on suicide watch. I don't believe the girl is violent. I don't believe she intended to do what she did. I believe she was in a psychotic state when it happened. And no, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I know enough about these medications over the years and how they affect people. And I think people should be allowed to represent that in a court of law. And I think it's a shame that they didn't. So I really hope that she does get an appeal and that they're able to have some experts on this. So SSRIs, SNRIs, another interesting tidbit just about them, just for people who take them, you should know, if nobody ever told you, you can't stop them abruptly. If you stop them abruptly, you will have side effects and they will be shitty. And don't let anybody tell you that they're not real, because they are. You can end up having sweats, feeling off balance, feeling dizzy, feeling like you're not, quote, there. And one of the ones that causes the worst withdrawal is an SNRI called Effexor. Effexor, people will be hospitalized for if they stop abruptly. It takes a long time to get off of Effexor, unfortunately. And again, not saying you shouldn't be on it. For many people, this has helped them and changed their life. But I do think that it has to be very selective when you prescribe these medicines. And I think sometimes it isn't. Okay. There's a lot of great doctors out there that are selective, that know this stuff, but I think some of them are just cavalier with it and they don't realize it. When they prescribe it, they don't say you need to make sure you taper off of it. So I remember I went to a talk with a psychiatrist when they were promoting their new antidepressant, and it wasn't Prestige, but it was another SNRI, Cymbalta. That's what it was. It was Cymbalta. Cymbalta has also now been approved for chronic pain, I believe, but it works very similarly to Effexor. And I said, why are these drugs not considered controlled? Because something is considered addictive if you need more of it to have the same effect. And when you stop it, if you have withdrawals, that's what addiction generally is. And SSRIs fit that bill. Generally, over time, you need more to have the same effect. And if you stop it, you have withdrawal symptoms. Some of them much worse than others. Prozac, not so much, because there's a very long half-life. So typically, you're not going to have crazy side effects from Prozac when you stop it. But some of these other ones can be brutal, especially, like I said, the Effexor. And the psychiatrist's answer, which I thought was not very helpful, was, well, they're not addictive. They don't have street value. I don't think that's the right answer, especially because if you've ever gone through withdrawal from any of these medicines and your doctor refuses to refill it, then you know for a fact that you'd probably go to the street and buy them just to get these symptoms to stop. Now, maybe people aren't getting, quote, high from them in the traditional sense. But when you have withdrawal from a drug and that you needed more to have the same effect, it's hard to not say there's some type of an addiction there. It doesn't mean that you're, like I said, getting high. But I feel like there's a sort of a middle ground there that people don't think about. And this happens with other drugs too. Gabapentin is another one. Gabapentin is oftentimes, people end up needing more to have the same effect. And if they stop it abruptly, you can have seizures, which you can die from. So, that's because gabapentin works in the brain the same way that, alcohol and benzodiazepines do, both of which will cause seizures and death if stopped abruptly when you're on the higher doses or the higher amounts of alcohol. And gabapentin's the same way. Other drugs like heroin or oxycodone or Oxycontin, which is the same drug, or Vicodin, which is hydrocodone, you may feel like you're about to die when you stop those abruptly, but you won't. You won't die from those. You will die from benzodiazepine withdrawal. You will die from alcohol withdrawal. And you could die from gabapentin withdrawal. And in some states, gabapentin has become a controlled drug, in fact. So I've kind of gone off topic because I've discussed some medical stuff, which I hope people find interesting. But I'm most concerned about Carly Gregg and her trial because I feel that it was unfair. And I think she needs an advocate out here, other advocates to discuss this issue because, I probably should go and watch the psychiatrist who prescribed this and see what they had to say. And her defense, I hope that they realize there is a test you can take that will tell you if you're going to have awful side effects. Now, it's not going to say genetically, if you take this, you're going to, create violent chaos. It doesn't say that, but it does say, pretty much like, don't take this. This will be bad for you. This won't work for you. It's not a good drug for you. That's what these genetic tests do. And like I said, if you're depressed or going to be on an antidepressant or are on an antidepressant with side effects and your doctor doesn't believe you, ask for that genetic test. And if you want to, even if you have to pay for it yourself, I don't think that's very expensive, honestly. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's probably worth it if you're having side effects or you don't feel like your depression is being managed properly. So let's see. Zoloft. Hi, Sipanon. You still here? Zoloft. Sertraline. Yeah, sertraline is an SSRI. It's one of the second or third ones to come out. Prozac was the first one. Like I said, fluoxetine. It's very long acting. Yeah, they did a New England Journal of Medicine compilation of all these SSRIs and looked at which ones had the most side effects, because they have side effects. Weight gain is a big one. Sexual dysfunction is another one. The inability to orgasm is very common with these SSRIs. And for whatever reason, doctors don't want to mention that or have problem talking about it. And, you know, it's real. These side effects are real. The one that had the least amount of side effects of the SSRIs was the citalopram, Celexa. But they later found out that when you take that during pregnancy, it can cause some heart defects in your children. So, you know, don't ever take anything when you're pregnant if you can help it. This isn't medical advice. I would just ask your doctor about it if you're pregnant, because they always find out later that some of these drugs, you know, do end up causing problems. Now, when people are severely depressed and they're pregnant, you don't want them to stop this medicine, but there are safer antidepressants to take when you're pregnant. You were on Zoloft several years. Do not mix with alcohol. Yeah, I mean, I think they may have some type of warning label on some of these drugs. But yeah, generally you shouldn't be drinking alcohol. People do it with these drugs all the time. So I just wanted to hop on here quickly because I just got really upset when I looked into this Carly case a little bit more and saw what happened with her. I feel like this is an injustice, and I really hope her appeal comes soon and that she gets a fair trial and they're able to put out this information about the SSRIs and how they affect young minds, especially when you're misdiagnosed, because apparently she wasn't on a mood stabilizer. She was just put on SSRI, and she has bipolar. So she was manic. And when you're manic, you can become psychotic. Extreme mania is psychosis. So that's truly a definition of insanity, you know, and not by choice. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's just a quick one. Got to get going. I have a live schedule later tonight about the Diddy situation. Just an old interview I found that I thought was interesting and you might find interesting. And thanks, Sippin' On, for being here, and anybody else who joined, and talk to you guys later. Got to put my outro music on, guys. You know how that is.
I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way. Yeah, I'ma do it my way.
I can't contain it, I'm coming out with a statement. You really changed, man, all your music and arrangement. You don't know shit, shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. 100 songs, 100 weeks, didn't change it. Experiments, development, intelligence, and patience. I'll do it all again, cause I never feel complacent. Let's keep the good vibes, positivity's contagious. I'm never looking back, cause I made a life that's passionate. A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate. For taking control of your life, go out and battle. And you think you have a dream, then act on it. Get after it, get out your head and fucking capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future.
All right, fam. Peace. See you later.